Amazing. So thank you so much for joining us today with Unlimit, our Journey to Success series. My name is Sim. I'm the head of content, and I'm so excited for today's interview. Could you please start us off with an introduction about yourself and a summary of your career pathway that's led you to where you are today?
So I'll try and avoid doing the long 35-minute CV summary here. I'll just do a quick bullet point. Look, I'm Tony Craddock. I'm the Director General and the founder of the Payments Association. I was a bit surprised to get the invitation to do this because I think typically when you look back on your career, you think, well, how on earth did that happen? So there's no formula here particularly, although if you look at sort of some common components, having been at school and really done well in maths and economics, and having a father who was a committed innovator. He was a banker, but he was the first person in 1976 to come and make a presentation at my school in front of the lower sixth on the potential power of computing. And nobody knew what computing was. And his company donated the first ever computer to my school. It was about the size of a small bus. And it did about as much as one sort of microchip could do, but a tiny amount. So I've kind of always had innovation and technology in my family's blood. I went then to university, did management science because I liked the idea of business. And people said to me, well, one day you'll be running your own business. I went, I'm not sure. That looks awfully difficult. I don't know how I could ever do that. So I went and learned how to sell things. I did a management traineeship in packaging. I then went into publishing, and after into publishing as a sales exec, I used to sell stuff, and I think it's a great way of cutting your teeth in business. Honestly, do you know what I mean, Sim? I mean, it is selling, being able to persuade people.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you're doing so well so far.
Well, that's good. That's good. So selling is good. And then I was invited to join this publishing agency that specialized in producing customer magazines for people. And there was a seminal moment in my career when I decided I had to set up my own company. And I remember going in to speak to my boss. And at the time, I just won a piece of business with BP. It was the biggest contract we'd ever won. And I said to him, I've got some really exciting news for you. And I was used to him saying, well done, well done, well done. And he said, I'm busy, come back later. And at that moment, I knew that as long as I depended upon somebody else for patting me on my back rather than myself, I would always work for someone else. And maybe I should not depend upon validation from other people. And at that moment, literally that afternoon, I went out and I spoke to a couple of other people, and we decided to set up a publishing agency in competition with my employer. It was a bit risky. We were sued when we left for conflict and things, but we survived and did very well. And I sold my own publishing agency called The Publishing Team when I was 23. No, 20. I started when I was 27 and sold it when I was 32. Had a brilliant business partner who carried on running it. And then I went into consulting for a while and discovered communities, discovered the power of people sitting down and working together. And I set up my own trade association as well, doing something else at the time. The International CRM Consortium was the first one. And the Association of Publishing Agencies was the second one. And I just loved people getting around a table, talking about common problems, working out how to collaborate, and doing stuff with the regulator or with the post office or whatever it was. And it was very powerful and great fun. So I never made money out of it, though. So then I decided I'm quite good at this collaboration thing, this community thing I seem to get. So maybe I should try and make some money out of it. And that was 20 years ago, and I set up a company that ultimately was the source of the Payments Association that I now run. So that's how it works. So, and then people say, "Am I in payments?" And I say, "Well, yeah, I love payments, but I'm actually a community geek."
Yeah, absolutely. But I think that's amazing because not only did you have the grounding roots from your own father, seeing that journey, but you came at it from such a unusual angle, but such a pivotal one, because bringing together all of these different voices is so imperative to bring that sort of like cohesive knowledge and that sense of community that you're so passionate about.
Yeah.
And I think that's beautiful, because we can all function very independently, we can all achieve whatever we would like to, but there is so much more growth and so much personality in doing it together. And that's, I'm sure we'll get into it further along the line, but when you look at the Payments Association and the sheer vastness of content available in different forms and like so regularly, there's no way that people cannot find somebody else to conversate with or engage with.
I could absolutely, and I was listening to. I'm a big podcast. I always be learning is one of my mantras. In fact, my chair, David Hunter, always says you've always got to be learning. So I listen to podcasts quite a lot. And I was listening to one called Nudge, which I really recommend. It's all about how you look at behavioral science and understand how through a small change at one level, you can make a big change elsewhere. And this was all about how important social interaction is to happiness, and how by socially interacting with other people in a way that helps them makes you even happier. And this is why COVID was so, on the one hand, in some situations was so wonderful, because you had a chance to connect more with your inner circle of family. But actually for many, many people was a disaster, because we missed that social interaction. That's why we stood on the streets and we clapped for the NHS, is because we wanted to connect with other people and give acknowledgement to people who are doing great stuff for us. And so, yeah, so communities do work. And the more remote we work, the more remote working we do, the more we need to connect, the more we need to have high touch, high connectivity, and a level of intimacy, not just at a kind of intellectual level that we're having now, but actually to be in the same place as people. And that's what a community helps. And that's the backbone of our thinking at the Payments Association.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing. I agree. I think even things like how we adapted so well to online connectivity, even for instance, I know I've seen so many of the webinars with the Payments Association and even things like that, they are so fantastic. But I think looking more holistically at your own career pathway leading up to the Payments Association and where you are now, what I would absolutely love to know, if you don't mind sharing, is what actually is a day in the life like for the Director General, because you're leading community within payments and you have so many plates that you're managing, that you're spinning. There's various areas of the association, different industries within payments and resources. There's much to it.
Well, it's a really great question, and I have the privilege of choice. In other words, there is really no limit to the number of things that we could spend our time focusing on. First of all, I'm really delighted that the advice I was given a few years ago was to focus on the things that you're uniquely able to do and get other people to be inspired to do things that you're poor at. Now, as a starter of a company, you have to be able to do everything, from working out how to set up the laptop to how to sell things, how to buy effectively, how to manage. I used to do the bookkeeping, so you can do pretty much everything, but most of the stuff you do, you don't do well. So what I think I'm uniquely able to do, and I worked on this quite hard, is I'm uniquely able to help to inspire change in other people so their relationships with each other is better through their relationship with me. And I'm clear on that. So anything that I do that's outside that kind of purpose is not something I should be spending my time on. So I also have as a result of all this, I've got an amazing team. I have a chief executive who runs the business. I have a top team of leaders, 5 leaders who are who are directors who are doing a superb job for us. I have an advisory board. I have a board of directors. But what do I do? Well, get up in the morning. I generally check my LinkedIn profile. I say, what's happening? What's going on? What's changing? What can I comment on that will inspire some insight or some stimulus or some learning? And then I have a series of meetings like this. I mean, I'm delighted to be able to do this one with you, Sim, and thank you again for the chance to share some thoughts. I do face-to-face stuff. I speak at conferences, but you know what I've got to spend more and more time on that I'm trying to create is some space to think a little bit more about what's happening next. Because we talk a lot about what's happening now. We're trying to live in the moment, but what's happening next? In particular, what's happening with the, if you like, the tectonic plates of payments that are shifting, the power that's shifting to and from banks, to and from in-person to remote, to and from digital and programmable money, thinking about the involvement of different participants. I have a sense that this industry is going through a transformational phase. So I'm trying to create space to do some thinking, and how I do that is by not having 10 meetings a day. So I take Fridays off. I always use that time for reflecting, and I try and create half days when I can just do some writing, maybe plan some presentations for conferences, that sort of thing. So that's typically my day. And I go out on the bike. I'm a cyclist, is my hobby. I do a few other things. I support schools. So I try and help young people to understand a bit about the world of work, particularly the world of entrepreneurialism. And I do sort of probably 4 or 5 sessions a year on going to schools and talking at their career days and that sort of thing. That's kind of me.
That's amazing. I think it's so incredible because it comes across very eloquently how pensive you are and how much reflection you do, particularly around the knowledge you've gained and what you can pay back. And I think because there is so much conversation flowing consistently through the Payments Association, and even all of the knowledge that you accrued beforehand, before leading up to it, would you be able to sort of give us a summary of how you've seen the world of payments grow and change, and what are some of the most significant developments which you think have brought us to the point that we're at today?
You know, that's a huge question. It's something that I reflect on quite often. So how has payments changed? I think we've moved from being the plumbers of financial services to leaders. And what that means is more of some things and less of other things. You know, more companies, more variety, more complexity. You know, more ways to pay, more value people get from paying, but also less cost for transacting. It's cheaper than it ever has been in real terms. Less predictable as to how people are actually going to pay. Less certainty perhaps about how things will work in the years to come because of these new things that we've got, the new technologies, shifts in the macro environment around the use of the dollar for liquidity, the threat from China potentially to the Western world. All of these things make it fascinating to think about the future. So yes, we've moved from plumbers, I think, to leaders, and I think in a world which has more of some things and less of others, and that's what makes it such a fascinating space. So what have been the most significant developments in payments? It's really hard because things are moving so fast. It's hard to kind of identify a select few, but let me see if I can run through what actually is quite a story. And so if you listen to this, you'll probably get a sense of the direction of travel of payments. First of all, the replacement of cash towards digital. We've seen it, we notice it, it continues in all sorts of ways. From the use of paper checks to the use of phones as the holder of value, a wallet holder. We've seen a change from slow clearing and settlement to near instant clearing of transactions, and what will in future become instant settlement. You know, in payments you distinguish between the clearing of the transaction and the settlement of the transaction, and settlement is the point at which the money actually moves. And traditionally, this has been done in big batches at the end of the day, and this happens now increasingly near instantly. But both is going to be, you know, when we move into digital payments, we'll have both instant clearing and instant settlement. That raises some huge questions for the future. It's all to do with the arrival of distributed ledger technology in the blockchain, and we're starting to see the adoption of digital currencies, which will be issued by central banks, by commercial banks, and maybe by non-bank payment service providers in time as well, through stable coins. This idea of money becoming programmable, that you can track and trace, has the opportunity to explode the world of money. So in future, you won't just be exchanging pound sterling, you'll be exchanging a digital pound. It'll be, so you could have red money, green money, blue money, money that has a different purpose, can have different conditions attached to it that's programmable in one way or another. So all of that's happening, which I think is very significant. Then it's a migration of fraud. It's a migration from fraud, from simply stealing money from people and taking money out of their wallets, to chip and pin fraud, which was the thing. And now it's authorized push payment fraud. I'm not sure what the next form of fraud is going to be, but the nature of our industry has changed based on its shift in how people steal from each other. The arrival of open banking and finance and open everything, that's going to be really exciting. The thought that we can embed payment transactions in experiences, in subscriptions, in how we simply use commerce. But we've also seen developments regarding the regulation of our industry. It's a really tough gig for regulators to regulate our industry well, because we move so quickly, and nobody waits around for Bitcoin to be regulated. They just use it. And so in time, that's all going to change. And the regulators becoming more assertive, and I think it's right that they are, because it'll help us to raise standards. But that also requires us to think differently about compliance and risk. And I think the final shift I'm seeing is relating to data, the data we have on individuals, whether it's due to their digital identity or not, but also how we share data and how we use the power of computing to exchange information about what's going on with the transactions and the people who are transacting, so that we can reduce fraud, we can increase security, and make payments better equipped to actually serve the world around us, which it's pretty good at now, but it could be a whole heap better. So I think in terms of developments, it's, from digital to cash, or from cash to digital. It's about digital currencies. It's about open banking and regulation and data. It's exciting. You can see it's an exciting space to be in.
Absolutely. It's so exciting. And I think it's so interesting, because I think a lot of the time, with what you were saying, the evolution I find has been incredibly fast. And I'm sure you've seen that at a far greater level than most of us have, which must have been incredibly interesting.
It has been fascinating. I think it's interesting, but when you look at this industry, people sometimes now refer to it as, if you like, a systemically important infrastructure, which in financial services means it matters. It's critical, to many industries, not just shops, but retail, e-commerce, hospitality, travel, transport, investment. There's lots and lots of different places where payments matters. You don't get up in the morning and think, whoopee, I want to pay. But if you couldn't pay, you'd really suffer. And that means, I think, we are potentially even a utility service rather than anything else. So that's exciting.
Absolutely. Thank you. I would like to take a sort of sidestep ever so slightly with your career. And I know you've touched on your previous journey within publishing, and I think that somewhat already answers the question. But I saw that you were the co-editor of the Paytech book. And I think that was very interesting. It was listed on your LinkedIn. And I thought, something that I would really like to sort of ask you about and touch on is about what inspired you to really drive down the route of published literature within this space, because it's so lucrative, there's so much happening. How did you find the process of creating literature that provides such a comprehensive understanding of our evolving industries?
So the old cliche is everyone has a book in them. I don't actually think that's necessarily true. When I looked at the market for learning about payments, there were no books. Nobody's ever written a book about payments, which is bizarre. There's 6,000 companies in this industry. It's a $180 billion industry. It employs tens of millions of people. Why on earth don't people write books about it? Well, the answer, of course, is because it's changing so hard, so fast, that by the time you've gone through the process of writing a book, it's out of date. So what was the experience so I had a chat with Suzanne Shushti, who runs FinTech Circle, and she had written the FinTech book. And I went to her one day and I said, look, we should do the Paytech book. There's a need for a Paytech book within, Paytech is a part of FinTech. And she said, yeah, it's a good idea. Let's see what we. And anyway, we came together with Robert Courtnidge and Marcos Zachariadis, who's a professor at Manchester, and the four of us, including Suzanne, edited his book. We commissioned other people in the market to volunteer their ideas. We selected the ideas, we got them to write it, we then edited it. It was a tortuous process. Honestly, I do not recommend it to anyone. It was hard work. And I mentioned earlier about doing things you're uniquely able to do. I can do it. I love the craftsmanship of words. I love being able to help to articulate thinking using vernacular and commentary, but trying to adapt a Chinese author's commentary on the future of some minute aspect of digital payments in a way that other people could understand was very hard work. But we did it. We published it, and it was a success. It was a success.
Bless you. Yeah, I mean, being in the writing space, I understand, but I think even still, you being able to have that tangible product at the end is such a rewarding experience.
It does feel good. It does feel good. On my bookcase over there's a couple of copies of the Paytech book, and it'll be put in my coffin when I die, I think.
Bless you. And I think also one of the reasons I really wanted to touch on it was because I think, much like we were discussing at the start, there's something about payments, fintech, that can sometimes overlook that element of creativity. And I'm sure it did have its very arduous moments, but I think it's such a beautiful thing to be able to show that you took such vast amounts of knowledge that can be so complex and managed to put it together into written literature. I think that's a phenomenal skill set to have.
Well, I don't take much credit though, because it was co-created. It was sourced. It was publicly sourced. So other people wrote the articles, or the chapters. We just had to sub-edit them.
No, of course, but that's what I mean. You've given that space to bring people together and cohesively bring it together, and I think that's amazing. As a customer that walks into a shop to purchase something, we may not think about the intricacies that lie behind it, but when you're working in the space or reading about the space, there's so much, and it's so incredible. It's so interesting. So thank you for sharing. A question that I would like to ask, particularly because of your career path, how much you're doing, how your days are spent. I think one of the questions I really wanted to ask was a bit more on the personal side, about how being in such an influential role where you are inspiring and enabling others, how do you yourself stay motivated and cope with symptoms of burnout or a day where you're lacking motivation?
Yeah, again, thank you for that. That's a very important question. Somebody once said to me, if you think that your career is going to end at the age when you're about 65, then when you get towards 65, you slow down, you think that's it. I've decided I'm going to live till I'm 117. And what that means to say, I'm actually going to only retire at about 95. That means to say I've got 30 plus years to go, 35 years to go. So that's kind of my mindset, is to think about the fact I'm only kind of halfway through my career. I'm not at the end of it. So that's the first thing. I've still got a lot of work to do. I've got a duty to express and use my ability in whatever way people feel it's useful to contribute to society in some way. So that's the first thing. The second thing, I have a really amazing support network around me. I have an amazing company of people who do great work. I have my advisory board. I have my family, of course, and my friends. I think it happens. So it happens. I love what I do. So it helps if you can find something you love what you do. My personality is akin, I've been told by my cycling friends, to be akin to a Labrador puppy. And it's about allowing that stuff to be okay, and not feel as if you've got to get too dragged down into the minutiae of everyday burdens. And I think the final thing is, I think there's a direct connection between your mental well-being and your physical well-being. I know this is cliched, but I think that if you do exercise, you get endorphins. If you get endorphins, you get happiness. So I do more sport than most people, and that I think is one of the reasons why I stay motivated.
Thank you for sharing that. I know that can be quite a personal thing, but I think we see more and more at the moment how people of all ages in all levels of seniority are struggling because not just in our own industry, but where our industry is so fast moving, people do struggle to stay abreast, and it can be quite an exhausting process.
I agree. It can be very exhausting, and my team work very hard. We try and balance the hard work with fun. I mean, we've just been away for an overnight team building to Amsterdam. We took the whole team, because I also think if you do well, you should share the upside with people. And our community is thriving, so the business behind it is thriving. So we should reward us. And we did a bit of work, but we just had fun, and it was great.
That sounds amazing. I love that idea.
Look forward to your team leader.
She most definitely rewards us. She's fantastic at organizing great opportunities for us. Our team is very much international. So we have our moments where we spend time together, and it is amazing. And I think a part of this series and about the concept behind A Journey to Success is the reason I asked these questions, and I hope you don't mind, is because I feel like it's also important to show that irrespective of how amazing your success is, people do still have those moments where they can also struggle.
That's true. And let me just qualify this. I don't feel as a strong glow of success. I think success is an odd word that British people don't like using it very much. We tend to feel a bit, and I think it's quite right. I think a degree of humility and sensitivity, the fact that none of us who might seem to be successful would be there if it wasn't for the people around them. And they're just doing their thing. I just do my thing, and other people do their thing. And it just so happens I happen to have kind of had an influence in certain ways, but other people do too. And no man or woman is an island. So it's really important.
Absolutely. That's a fantastic ideology to live by. I love that. And that will come back into relevance ever so slightly in our very last question. But before we do get there, I wanted to ask a very broad question. So you are free to answer however you like. What are your top 3 trends in payments that you're most excited to see come into fruition in the next 5 years?
Wow. Okay. The big one. Number 1, digital currencies. So we see the continuous evolution and improvement of the payments industry. And that's very exciting. And then suddenly over here, left field, right field, we in our peripheral vision happens distributed ledger technology and tokenization. And we kind of know it's going to be relevant. We are a bit scared about it. We're not sure, but a bit worried. But then we realize actually it's got some attributes that allow us to do some things that conventional money simply can't do. Some of them we don't know yet. But we see this it's a bit like the adoption of the iPhone a decade or more ago. I think the potential for impacting our world is going to be huge from digital currencies and how assets are tokenized. So that's the first area. The second area won't surprise you: generative artificial intelligence and AI. I've already seen some phenomenal things being done with that. It's going to make so much of our hard and heavy lifting work very easy. It's going to mean we're going to have more time to do more value-adding stuff. It'll challenge some roles in our industry and many others, but I think AI, of course, is the future. I'd like to think the third one is a bit oblique. I think the other thing that will affect our industry is how well we bring a more diverse pool of talent to work in it. We typically are very male oriented. Technology tends to be, financial services tends to be. I would like to see more gender diversity, more ethnic diversity, more gender-oriented diversity, and I'd like to see more physical diversity as well. To me, that's something I stand for. I think our community will be richer and better at delivering value and solutions to problems if we do that. So those are the three things: digital currencies, AI, and diversity.
Those are all impeccable choices. Thank you. And I heavily agree with the third as well. I agree with all of your points, but I think the element of diversity and creating space for everybody within the industry is something that so many organizations and individuals are tackling at the moment, Limit included. So that will be a very impressive space to keep an eye on. So thank you so much.
Okay.
And our final question, although I know you've mentioned being such a humble successor, how do you define success?
Oh goodness, I think I would define success as being, in my personal situation, is being able to look back and see that other people are able to run the business that I started. So I believe human beings have the opportunity to create something, to create things out of nothing. Creativity is the most wonderful thing to have, and I think in a business is an idea. It's a concept. It's not a thing. You know, people. What happens is I have people, both volunteers and paid for, who do stuff because 15 years ago I had an idea. And I've invested to help to bring it all together. So, and I'm expecting in one day I will not be the Director General of the Payments Association, and somebody else will be running it. And I'm really looking forward to be able to look at its activities and have a sense that actually this is something that I helped to create, and that's cool. That's what success will be.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that.